John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Break out with your bookie, Harrod Resort. Bally's Atlantic City, Wild Wild West. They're taking bets at the new sportsbook wager today at the book. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. So, John, how much longer can Gruden keep putting efforts like that up before they say, hey, man, maybe we made a mistake?
Well, I think people have kind of already figured out they made a mistake, but he's got some time. It's pretty clear he's going to rip this thing down, build it up in his own sort of way that he wants to, and at that point, they'll start to talk about potentially moving on. But you're talking at least 2 years down the road. And you know, you talk about that $100 million figure. I don't think it's that. You know, Bob Lamont's his agent, who's a high-profile agent for coaches. He tends to get out favorable numbers. I don't think it's quite that bad. But they've married themselves to Jon Gruden. It's going to be more than 1 year, no matter how bad this year is. And I think you're talking about a team. You look at the roster. You look at how many over 30 players they have. He doesn't believe one iota in Derek Carr. He's going to move on from Derek Carr. That's going to be a completely different football team. And at that stage, you have to say, then you have to start to make tough decisions. I've talked about a lot. I just think John is from a different era. And that's not how they play football in this era. And he's behind the eight ball. And I don't think it's going to get better than it is. It has to. We talked about the Cleveland Browns. When you hit rock bottom, it has to get somewhat better, but I don't think it's ever going to get real good. Let's put it that way.
Depends how bottom his rock bottom is.
Well, it's pretty. It's not 0-16, but
it might have been.
I'm
Giants.
joking.
Had they not won one game, it might have been.
Yeah, I mean, for all the New York Giants revisionist historians who are saying, "Oh, well, we'll just go get a quarterback this time." Well, I got news for you. It's looking like the Raiders are going to be worse than you. And you can say they have Derek Carr. Jon Gruden doesn't give a you-know-what about Derek Carr. If the kid from Oregon comes out and the Raiders have the number one pick, they're taking him.
Right. You know, it's funny because it's not a quarterback favorable draft. And we were talking, if you're this bad and you end up with, say, Nick Bosa, was this year really worth it? I'm not saying that Bosa's going to stink, but you had Khalil Mack. We've seen J.J. Watt. We've seen other great defensive ends and players get drafted number one, but they don't change your franchise.
No, there's only one position that does. And I will say that Jon Gruden, for all the criticism you want to throw about, he does understand that, and he will take the quarterback. That's what I'm saying. He will. Mm-hmm. If he has the number one pick. The issue with him is he's never happy. He's always got a wandering eye, no matter who his quarterback is.
Does his wife know this?
Now he's never had somebody of that stature, and perhaps that's what he wants. And he wants the young kid that number one overall that you can build upon and sort of teach him from the ground up. A lot of coaches, a lot of headstrong coaches don't like, and they'll always say they have bad habits from previous coaches. That's what I think John thinks about every quarterback.
Did you guys see I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, he just thinks Derek Carr has some bad habits from other coaches, and maybe he does. Nobody's perfect. You have to build, and that's why Sean McVay gets all the credit he gets, and Matt Nagy's getting all the credit he gets, because let me tell you, those guys inherited some flawed quarterbacks, and they're maximizing what they have. That's what you're supposed to do, not always say, I want this guy because this guy didn't learn properly.
I was just going to say real quick, did you guys see what Jon Gruden said earlier today? He said at the end of all of our games so far this year, there's multiple players who are dying and would love to become an Oakland Raider in the future. Do you buy that?
I never look. As bad as any team is, this is the NFL. there's only 32 teams, and the Oakland Raiders are the Oakland Raiders, soon to be the Las Vegas Raiders. But the Raiders are the Raiders. They're a storied franchise, even though a newer generation might find that hard to believe. They can turn it around from that standpoint very quickly. This is also, when you get to Las Vegas, that's a market people are going to want to be in, want to be around. So I don't think that part of it's going to be any issue. There's always going to be players wanting to play with the Raiders because it's the Raiders. But they just stink, and they stink because the coach is antiquated and trying to win a different way. And we'll see. I said when he got hired, this is going to be a science experiment. Right now, it's ugly. If he can figure something out 2 or 3 years down the road, maybe he makes us all look silly.
Look,
but
real
I
quick,
find that hard to believe.
Can you really say anymore that people will want to play for the Raiders because of they haven't been good. They've been good once in like 20 years.
Yeah.
Like nobody has elected to say, I want to go play for the Raiders because they're the Raiders.
And who wants to play for Gruden? Like you said, he's like
no,
outdated.
What I'm trying to say is it's not going to be – people are not going to turn down playing for the Raiders because it's a bad market, because it's Buffalo and there's bad weather. That part of it, I don't believe. Yeah, they haven't been successful. And I'm not saying people are going to choose the Raiders over another franchise because they're bad right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is, to me, that's not a long term. We used to talk about this with the Sixers, Mike. Long term, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Short term, yeah, maybe, because they're so bad. But I don't think it's going to be a stain on that organization for decades to come, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. We got a couple of interesting games this weekend that have, NFC East. This Redskins team going against the Falcons. Falcons have kind of got themselves back into it. They still don't play great defense. But I think this Redskins team, they run the ball. They got a safe quarterback. They have a good offensive line. They play good defense. I like this team. But I think this will be an interesting test. Like if you lose at home to the Falcons, you're probably not going to be taken serious. And if you win the game, you're probably not going to be taken. They're almost like in a no-win situation. But if they don't win, we'll kind of say, we don't believe in the Redskins.
Yeah, well, I think if they do win, you're right. I don't think anyone believes in the Redskins yet anyway. I don't know, even if a win changes that, a loss obviously just puts them more in that column. But
the stain that you talk about.
Game. Yeah.
Wandering eye.
Sneaky big game for the Eagles because obviously you sort of, because you beat the Falcons, you want them back in the mix. And obviously you want the Redskins coming back to you. So if the Falcons can come up with a win here, and they have been very good offensively, they're averaging over 400 yards a game. Matt Ryan's having a tremendous year, even though people who watched him play against the Eagles will not realize that. He's been lights out since that game. The defense has been injury plagued. I mean, they lost a lot of key players, and that's been the issue with the Falcons. But they can hurt you offensively. They can still hurt you.
Oh, no question.
So I mean, this is a big game for the Eagles, and you hope the Falcons are bringing their A game. They're certainly talented enough to beat the Redskins.
I know Monday night you got Dallas. This one's interesting because Tennessee likes to make the game kind of grind it out, run the ball, make it ugly. That's what Dallas wants to do, typically to win a game. So Amari Cooper's going to make his debut. But is Tennessee a bad matchup for Dallas?
No, I don't think Tennessee's a bad matchup for anybody right now because they just can't move the football. It's sort of the exact opposite when you look at the NFC East games, the dichotomy. You have this great offense in Atlanta and this terrible offense in Tennessee, which is not even averaging 300 yards a game. That's tough to do in today's NFL. And it's weird when you think about it from the Eagles standpoint because they were so good against the Falcons and so bad against the Titans defensively. It's strange. But ever since that game, Tennessee has gone into the tank from an offensive standpoint, ever since they played the Eagles. And Dallas, the strength of that team now is the defensive side of the football. It really is. They have really good linebackers. Jalen Smith is back. He's playing at a very high level. Vander Esch is really good. That's a rookie the Eagles would have seriously considered taking if he fell to 32. They liked him a lot. He's really good, and obviously Sean Lee when he's out there. Front seven, Byron Jones is playing lights out in the secondary. That defense has all of a sudden gotten really talented out of nowhere. And the offense has been the issue. Outside Zeke Elliott, that's all they had. And now they brought in Amari Cooper, and we'll see how much that helps them. I just don't think Dak Prescott is a guy who's going to throw the football all over the lot. So I think they're going to continue to struggle throwing it, and it comes down to can Zeke Elliott carry that offense.
All right, Don McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. No Eagles this week, so no countdown to kickoff. The guys will be back next Sunday night when the Eagles take on the Dallas Cowboys. The countdown to kickoff show next week for Eagles-Cowboys on the 11th will start at 5 p.m. They'll take you to 4 p.m., I'm sorry. They'll take you from 4 to 6. Eagles-Cowboys coverage begins at 7 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, have a great weekend, my man.
All right, you too. Enjoy the non-Eagles weekend.